Greetings once more from 5-Star Recaps. Today, we'll show you the 2016 drama crime film Just Mercy, which is based on a real-life event of a black man. Let's get started. In 1987, Walter Johnny D. McMillian, an African-American owner of a small pulpwood company, was wrongly convicted, declared guilty, and given the death penalty in Monroe County, Alabama, for the murder of Rhonda Morrison, an 18-year-old white woman. In addition to the fraudulent accusations, he remained imprisoned until the day of his execution. The focus of the story then shifts to Bryan Stevenson, a sincere young Harvard Law student, who visits a local jail in Jackson, Georgia. While speaking with Henry, a convicted murderer, Bryan informs Henry that there will soon be legal representation for him, and others. Thanks to the efforts of the Southern Prisoners Defense Committee, where he serves as an intern. Bryan also clarifies to Henry that he is not in danger of being put to death anytime within the coming year. When Henry hears this, he is relieved and the two begin to laugh and talk about their early years before a police officer forcibly approaches and takes Henry away. Bryan's eyes are in disbelief after witnessing Henry in such a vulnerable state. After graduating 2 years later, Bryan declines lucrative job offers and instead relocates to Alabama in order to defend wrongfully imprisoned individuals who cannot afford legal representation in the pursuit of their release. Bryan's family was against him relocating, more so his mother worries for his son's safety, but Bryan reassures her he will be okay. In Alabama, he runs across his old friend Eva Ansley, with whom he had intended to launch a legal aid program for prisoners on death row. Eva and Bryan ran into their first roadblock when a white man who intended to rent them an office declines to do so after finding out that they are attorneys for death row inmates. Upset about the predicament, they set up a formal location back at Eva's home and decide they will begin working from there. She describes how the tale of a death row inmate had an impact on her and compelled her to seek out a helping hand. When Eva received a call from a Harvard lawyer, Bryan, indicating that he had federal funds to build a legal center for prisoners on death row, she was prepared to give up everything else. She claims that she was there before Bryan even considered hiring her. Bryan goes to a prison to visit 6 prisoners and is confused when told to take off his clothing. Although Bryan claims that lawyers aren't strip-searched on legal visits, the police won't let him in unless he strips off. After being checked out, he contacts his clients, who inform him of the unsuitable conduct of judges and attorneys toward them. While discussing his sentence-related anecdote, Bryan is told by Herbert Richardson about his experience with PTSD as a Vietnam War veteran. He tells Bryan that even though he placed the bomb on a porch, he had no intention of killing anyone. Johnny D appears to be tired of lawyers who leave cases when the money is gone. According to Johnny D, he has already exhausted all options to prevent him from being executed, therefore he doesn't expect Bryan to do anything particularly noteworthy. He told Bryan he doesn't know what he's doing because, like every other black man who crosses the line, authorities will soon eat him alive and spit him out. He continues by saying that a false witness made the whole thing up out of despair, and that Bryan wouldn't be able to help them understand how it feels to be found guilty without fingerprints and other physical evidence. Johnny returns to his cell thereafter. He chats with Herbert and the other guys who believe Bryan is a kind lawyer, but Johnny and Ray say that being polite can only land you in jail. He returns to Eva's house and makes an effort to find the files of the people he met there. He informs Eva in the morning that he believes Johnny D is innocent because Ralph Myers, the man who provided the evidence in support of his claim, has spent the majority of his life behind bars and was found guilty of another murder. In addition, another witness, Bill Hooks, testified that Johnny's truck was on the side of the road where the murder took place. Eva and Bryan think Myers offered to reveal the murderer's identity in exchange for a light sentence to the police, after they failed to solve the case in a year. Ryan chooses to meet with the DA. Tommy Chapman, a former public defender, he worries that other authorities may not be on his side. The following day, when he sees Mr. Chapman, Bryan expresses his doubts over the validity of Johnny's conviction. According to Chapman, Johnny hurt a lot of people in Monroe County, and if Bryan strokes those wounds, he will upset a lot of people. Bryan counters that it is not his responsibility to make people happy but rather to secure justice for his clients. As he exits the office, he sees 3 black men being detained and transported to jail. Bryan makes his way to Johnny's house where he meets Minnie, his wife, and other members of the family. They are certain that Johnny could not possibly be capable of committing such a crime. Additionally, Johnny was working on his truck with his son the morning of the murder. Johnny also hosted a fish fry party with his family to raise money for the church and was there all morning. One family member says that Johnny cheated on his wife after he was seen having an affair with a white woman. Her spouse told everyone, but several people claim he continued to fabricate tales about them, portraying them as everything from drug dealers to murderers. Minnie was present during the entire conversation, and even though her husband's infidelity caused her pain, he took the lawsuit since he was her child's father. Bryan is instructed to persuade Johnny D to let him fight on his behalf before returning home. Bryan spoke with Darnell, one of John's friend. He informs him that Bill's evidence is untrue, because Bill was with him that morning replacing the head gasket on a Camaro, but the police had arrested him for burglary. Following the statement, they released him and dropped all charges. Darnell is reluctant at first to make a statement, but he eventually consents to assist Bryan in reopening the case. The next morning, Bryan encounters Johnny D. He is aware of Bryan's visit to his family and finds Bryan's fight to be quite admirable. Bryan explains the details of his grandfather's murder because of a black and white TV, as they were perplexed as to why a Harvard lawyer is handling up cases of death row inmates. Bryan explains that nobody assisted black people, and he came to the realization that nobody cared outside of his community. But he understands what it's like to live in the background, and that's why he's acting the way he is on behalf of black people. After hearing that, Johnny agrees that Bryan can reopen his case file. The day of Herbert's execution has been set. Meanwhile, Eva receives a threat: if she continues to work with black people, they will blow up her home. Johnny D demonstrates that while traveling this path won't be simple, she will succeed in her goals. Anyhow, they have both started looking for a local witness who can discuss the occurrence as their first step in Johnny's case. No one wants to criticize the girl's family, but a retired policeman allows them to enter the house so they may discuss quickly. Eva and Bryan now rented a space and gave the firm the name Equal Justice Initiative. On the other side, a police officer detained Darnell on his shift in front of his supervisor. Darnell was furious with Bryan for putting him in danger and decided to back down by saying to Bryan, "Tell Johnny D I'm sorry." Ryan becomes frustrated with the government, but when he visits Sheriff Tate, he discovers the DEA laughing. It appears that both have come up with a strategy to halt Bryan. They tell him throughout the conversation that his motion to reopen the case was denied. Bryan storms out of the office in rage. Johnny D and Bryan talk about their next course of action after Darnell. Bryan joins Ralph Myers in the jail cafeteria. They intend to speak with Myers directly. He won't discuss anything involving Johnny D, but Ryan manages to get some attention for his testimony in some way. Myers claims that on the day of his arrest, police questioned him about the girl's murder. He continues by claiming that following the tragedy, everyone was only interested in finding out who had killed the girl. He goes on to say that when individuals care about something this strongly, they would do anything to get it. Now even Bryan suspects that the police are concealing his initial statement, so Bryan went in search of it, because Myers was questioned about Rhonda Morrison on June 3, but the testimony presented in court was recorded almost 2 months later. When Bryan analyzes Myers' case files while visiting Escambia courthouse, he fortunately discovers evidence that refutes a second Myers testimony that was captured on tape. While rejecting Kate's offer to frame and send a man for a murder, he clarifies on the sheriff audio that he knows nothing about the death of Rhonda Morrison. He was astounded to learn that Johnny D had been telling the truth since day one. The day for Herbert execution has come. He will be executed the following day unless the court grant the delay that Bryan has requested. Johnny D tells Herbert to calm down as he believes in Bryan. He advised waiting until the very last minute to see if his date has been delayed. In the morning, Bryan receives a call from the court informing him that his motion to postpone Herbert's execution was denied. Soon after, Herbert is executed in Alabama by electrocution as per the jury's directive. Bryan stands up and defends fellow death row inmates despite the fact that he has broken down. Myers acknowledges that he was tortured and threatened with death until he gave the statement. While in court, they wanted him to speak of this discussion regarding the veracity of his initial testimony. Myers appears perplexed by his responses and Bryan urges him to speak the truth. He eventually admitted to lying to the court regarding Johnny D at the time. When Myers' doctor gives testimony about Myers' mental illness as a result of receiving an electric shock from the state, Bryan's arguments are strengthened. Furthermore, the former police officer Bryan had previously interacted with testified that Rhonda's body was phased out rather than facing up as Myers had said. He continued by saying that he was sacked from his job because he wouldn't lie before the court. After a month, the court did not grant Johnny D's request for a new trial, because there was insufficient proof that Ralph Myers had lied in the opening statement. Johnny will be put to death. He was sent back to Holman Correctional Facility. Bryan is distraught because he believes he has made matters worse for Johnny's family. Nonetheless, while Johnny is in jail, he thanked Bryan for providing the truth, which can no longer be taken away from him and his family. But Bryan isn't considering giving up. He is preparing a motion to present the evidence to the state Supreme Court in Montgomery, who holds the authority to overturn the previous ruling and order a new trial. In order to gather support for Johnny D, he appears on 60 Minutes before filing an appeal with the Alabama Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has overruled the circuit court's decision and ordered a fresh trial for Johnny D. Tommy Chapman, however, is asking the court to halt the proceedings. When Bryan approaches Chapman at his home to persuade him to support his move, Chapman yells at him and throws him out. On the day when the motion was to be heard, in his appeal, Bryan addresses the judge. After Chapman agrees to help him with his request, which results in the case being dismissed, Johnny D is ultimately reunited with his family. Bryan Stevenson and his counsel secured relief reversals and releases for more than 140 death row inmates, according to the epilogue. Stevenson and McMillian were close friends right up until Stevenson's early onset dementia caused his death in 2013. Before Bryan Stevenson won the dismissal of the charges against Anthony Ray Hinton, a former cellmate of Johnny D., who served 28 years on death row, Hinton was released in 2015. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Thank you for watching.